Ozonics Killerwinds podcast back again. He's Nick Simon. I'm Cole Tanner. Let's do this. You don't get to announce yourself today.
Let's roll.
No, you can say who you are.
My name is Nick Simon.
There you go. I'm Cole Tanner. Okay, before we start, let's just get into it. It is hot in here.
Super hot.
For the record, we are from Iowa. There's other people that work at Ozonics that are from Texas. And the Texas Ozonics coworkers would say that it is not hot in here.
Yes.
They would say this is borderline air conditioning. But the air conditioning isn't working. That's why it's hot in here. It's a steamy 82.
Yes.
We got lights going. We got lights all over. It's warm.
It's not good.
Supposedly, the HVAC guys came here the other day and quote-unquote fixed it. Not so much. We walked in this morning on a Monday morning. We're like, whoa.
Yahtzee.
She's a little toasty. She's a little stuffy.
Yes.
So for the viewer-listener experience, when we usually do the podcast, we shut the system off to make it quiet so you don't hear a little bit of a hum in the background. So It's just really, really... I can't find my noise. So it's really... Whoa. So it's really quiet.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we want.
Yes. Dead quiet.
So we turn it off. Well, we usually cool it way down right beforehand, and then it just rises up. Well, we're already starting way up here.
Yeah.
We're going hot today.
Yeah.
We're just going straight into it. Listen, caveat today, I don't know if this is going to be the longest podcast we've ever done, but it is going to be chock full of a lot of facts.
Tons of facts.
So sharpen your pencil and get ready because we are talking history of whitetails in Iowa.
Yep.
And you know me, I'm Mr. Fact Guy.
Yeah, he loves facts.
I love me some good facts.
Yep.
So I got some paper. I did some highlighting. I've got all sorts of stuff. So we're going to talk about the history of Iowa and whitetails. We're going to talk about some just really interesting circumstances that led us to where we are now. We're going to talk a little bit about why whitetails thrive so much, which is kind of maybe a little bit of the Captain Obvious. But I think when you really stop and think about it, you're like, huh, interesting.
Yeah.
Already beating up some sweat, baby. So let's jump right into this.
I know, I am too, actually.
Yeah.
My hands are like slipping on the table.
I know. Okay, so let's get right in here, okay? First off, it's interesting because we've done a podcast about bison in Iowa,
right,
about elk and black bear in Iowa, and those animals really felt the demise and just going down the Drano on populations in the early 1800s, okay? 1820s, 1830s. That's when really those populations just plummeted. And again, Iowa, one of the really, really important facts to remember is Iowa didn't become a part of the Union. It didn't become a state in the Union until December 28th, 1846.
Got it.
Okay? So before that, it was just a place, man. People were just exploring. You know, like they were going up the Des Moines River, Lewis and Clark. We've talked about that. You know what I mean? And along the way, they were just doing what they had to do. They were shooting elk and bison and whitetails for food. They were shooting them for trade.
The dragoons,
man. There was
trail.
No, seriously, there wasn't really any choice.
Yeah.
And the bison herds, the elk herds, the black bear herds were plummeting, and whitetail were doing the same thing. It was just going down the drain.
Yeah.
And luckily, along the way, there was conservationists that thought, hey, man, we need to start to do something here.
Right.
So again, you talked about, I'm going to fast forward a little bit here. When you got to the 1880s, you're talking about the 1820s, 30s, 40s, there was very few deer. By the 1880s, it was talked about historically that there was very few sightings. I mean, it was rare to see a whitetail.
Got it.
Okay. So with that said, one of the first laws dealing with whitetails, again, Iowa became a state in 1846. One of the first laws dealing with whitetails was 1856, okay, which was a law was passed to help protect deer by providing a closed season from February 1st to July 15th. Before that, you just hunt them whenever you wanted to.
Interesting.
You follow what I'm saying?
From February 1st to July?
Yep. That was the first law that was passed to limit the season. Okay?
No kidding.
Yeah. Oh, no, dude. I'm going to try to blow your mind. If I had a noise for an explosion, I would press that button. Sorry, getting excited here. In 1872, they closed the deer season the closure of the deer season was extended from January 1st through September 15th.
Okay.
Okay, so they extended it farther, and they made that closing even longer. And then in 1898, during the 27th General Assembly, they, kind of the biggest reaching law that was passed, provided a complete protection for deer by closing the season year-round. By that time, deer were nearly extinct throughout the entire state. Dang. 1898, they closed it down, dude. And here's the crazy thing. I wish I hear that. Bum, bum, bum. They had the season closed for like over 50 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, dude.
Well, riddle me this quick.
From 1898, 54 years till 1952, 1953 is when they were like, okay, we need to do something.
Wow.
We need to bring the season back. Deer are starting to get too many. They had it closed for 50 plus years.
What?
I would drop the mic right now. I'm dropping the paper.
Well, riddle me this. Did it say anything of the only rule was you could only hunt them through this time? Like before they closed it for the 50 years, you could just hunt them through that time. There wasn't any like tagging system or anything like that. It was just, you can hunt them now. You can shoot as many as you want.
Yeah, I don't think so. The tagging part, tagging systems and like reporting systems, honestly, dude, that didn't even become a thing until like the 90s, the 1990s. Like they didn't.
Really?
Yeah, dude, they didn't tag deer back in the day.
So it was just a free for all. You could just shoot as many as you want.
I don't know if it was a free for all, but like the reporting and the documenting we do now, that was a product of like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. I don't like, but again, do I have any facts here about how the seasons were laid out? I don't. I don't know how the seasons were. But again, dude, they didn't have compound bows in the 1800s,
exactly.
So it was a lot of it was like flintlock muzzle loaders and some sort of rifle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If they had a bow season, I don't even think they probably had a bow season. They just had a general deer hunting season.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was how do we kill the deer?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that was just my biggest question because it's like, well, yeah, no wonder it went basically extinct if there's nothing in place and you can just go shoot every single deer you see.
Oh no, yeah, and honestly, dude, it talked about that. As settlers arrived in Iowa in the early 1800s, they were cultivating land, and initially they were, it was an uncontrolled exploitation for food, for hides, which rapidly diminished the deer numbers. Right. Man. I mean, this is a fact that has nothing to do with Iowa, but I've told you that before about how a dollar bill is called
a buck.
It's called a buck. Well, why is it called a buck? Because in the New England region, way back, a whitetail buck was worth $1.
Yep.
You shot a deer, and that hide, the deer was worth $1. So then all of a sudden there's like, hey, that's worth $1. It's worth a whitetail buck.
There you go.
And then all of a sudden they coined the phrase, they called it a buck.
Yep.
A lot of people don't know that. All right, let's get back to it. So there was 50 plus years, there was no hunting in Iowa.
Jeez.
Okay. So basically, dude, there's some huge dominoes that fell through the history of Iowa and whitetails. That's just like, now you look back, you're like, holy cow, what a crazy time.
Yeah.
Just the fact that in 1898, the state of Iowa was like somebody at what was, I think, the DNR then, or I don't even know when the DNR was started, but somebody said, we need to close these seasons down or we're not going to have any deer left.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yep.
Imagine if Iowa became a state, instead of in 1846, it became a state in 1825. We'd still probably have elk walking around. We'd still probably have bison walking around.
Right.
Could you imagine? Can you imagine how much different the state would look?
Yeah, it'd be way different. It'd be crazy.
Or, devil's advocate, would it be? Because could bison and elk in the state of Iowa, if they would have, and again, we're getting the hypothetical here, but I love hypothetical. I'm a hypothetical guy. I love hypothetical discussions. We've been talking about getting in one of these in a while. If Iowa would have became a state, instead of in 1846, if it would have became a state in 1825, and Iowa would have, from a conservation perspective, tried to protect bison and elk like they did whitetails,
yeah,
would we have the same looking state as we do now? Or would those species have had such a big influence and impact on the landscape that it would have changed the agriculture that Iowa became? Or would we have arrived right where we are now because agriculture has become so popular and bison running around on farmland wouldn't work?
I mean, I think for sure it'd be different.
Think so?
Yeah. That's what I think.
I don't know.
I mean, think about it. It's two huge species of animals. Like, it's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah. I would hope it would be different. That would be so awesome if it would have been different.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm playing devil's advocate. I think it'd be different too.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to play the other side
Yeah.
But in the same regard, like, would it be that different? Because eventually agriculture would have evolved like it has, and they would have just kept farming and tilling it and farming and tilling. Or would there have been more land protected for, animals? Like, for example, like we've talked about this before. Look at Theodore Roosevelt. He passed a law that they called it the Big Ditch. That was the Grand Canyon. Mm-hmm. He protected the Grand Canyon. Imagine if he wouldn't have done that. The Grand Canyon could have been mined up.
Right.
Could have been privately owned. It would have never been the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
It might not even look like that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, now it's a national treasure.
Right.
Yellowstone, Yosemite, all these places.
Right.
I know Iowa's not the Yellowstone, but still,
though.
You follow me?
Yeah.
It's just kind of interesting to think like how if those species would have made it through, how that would have changed things. Okay, We're getting way off.
Okay.
That's really interesting stuff to think about. Okay. This writing's really small, so I have to squint my eyes a little bit. Okay. This is where it starts to get really interesting. So we know by the time it got to 1898, there wasn't hardly any deer left. Mm-hmm. The crazy thing is there are 2 documented private deer herds that the more I researched, there was actually some really, really interesting information written in 1913 by William T. Hornady in his book called Our Vanishing Wildlife, Its Extinction and Preservation, which if you're looking for a good read, I'm sure that would be a really interesting read. But it talked about one of the 2, actually talks about both deer herds. But one thing even then, which again, 1913 was way closer to when some of this was going on.
Yeah.
They don't know where these herds came from, how these people got these deer. There's speculation, but they don't entirely know. You follow me? They're just like these people just like, hey, we've got some acres and we've got some whitetail deer. And back then there was not hardly anything left. So people looked at them like, oh, check that out.
Yeah.
It's like when even now when you drive by an elk farm and you see elk, you're like, hey, check that out.
Right.
Or you see bison, you're like, slow down. You're like, oh, if you drive on I-35 down and drive past Ames on the west side of the road, you see bison. I look over every single time.
Yep.
Same type of thing way back then. Okay. So in 1894, 35 whitetails escaped from a captive herd owned by a guy named William Cuppy of Avoca, Iowa, which is in Pottawatomie County. So basically western Iowa.
Yep.
West central Iowa.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to read verbatim right out from a quote from the book, which is really, really interesting. So on the one fact, I saw that it was 1894. And on this other documentation of it, talked it was 1885. But it says, this is by William T. Hornady, okay? It says, William T. Hornady talks about, in 1885, W.B. Cuppy of Avoca, Iowa, purchased 5 deer and placed them in a paddock on his 600-acre farm. By 1900, 15 years later, that herd had increased to 32 head. And then one night, someone kindly opened the gate of the enclosure and gave the freedom to the city.
Ooh.
Freedom of the city. Quote unquote, Mr. Cuppy made no effort to capture them, possibly because they decided to annex his farm as their habitat. When a neighbor led the deer back to his house with like a pail of corn, baiting the deer back to the owner's door, he declined to impound them on the grounds that it was unnecessary, Hornady wrote. According to the book that Hornady wrote, in 1912, the local deer herd had increased to 400, doubling roughly every 3 years, and had spread across areas of Cuppy's Farm, and thereafter into western Iowa and the Los Hills. The state had ended deer hunting in 1898 and will remain closed for 54 years. This was during that period.
Oh.
Yeah. So this guy just had a herd of deer. So then, again, one of those monumental pillars. Imagine when the guy brought the deer back.
Yeah.
With a pail, like, ding, 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 ding. Come on, deer, come on. He brings them all back and says, hey, man, you want to put these deer back? He's like, no, just let them go. Basically, it talks about in these pieces that, like, a lot of the deer in western Iowa are because of this herd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. Like, it's just really, really bizarre. Yeah. So then the other one that was kind of another kind of monumental, pillar to fall over, was in the early 1920s. About 60 deer escaped from what was called the Singmaster Farm in Washington County and became established along the Skunk River.
No kidding.
Okay. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I lived in that area.
Okay. This one is really interesting. Okay. So I didn't know this, but if you research this and Google this on the internet, the Singmaster name, which I think is probably still down there somewhere, was not only became known because of this whitetail thing, but was actually their family was from Keokuk County. The Keokuk County family was renowned for its Bergeron draft horses.
Ooh.
Yeah, which played a key role in that area and farming and everything. Several generations of the Singmasters had a hand in horse trade, but it was this J.O. was his name, who made buying and selling them his life's work. He traveled, he was a resident of Kyoto, made 56 steamship trips to Europe to buy horses. Think about that. Hey, I'm from Iowa. You know what? I'm just going to go to Europe. I haven't been to Europe now. We have jets.
Yeah, riddle me that.
Yeah, riddle me that. In the 1900s, the guy was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a steamship. I don't even know what a steamship looks like. Obviously, blows
More power
out
to the guy.
pushes out some steam, a lot of steam. Yeah, to transport horses back to Iowa. At various points on the family farm and the history of the farm, there were other animals that they acquired. There was documentation how he had a herd of buffalo, had a herd of bison, that were actually remnant from the Yellowstone region herd, which is really cool because bison were long gone by then.
Yeah,
long gone. So he got these from Yellowstone, which is kind of cool. He had a number of elk, and they don't know where those came from either. Okay. But again, what we're interested in this story is that he got whitetails. And again, in the mid 1920s, a flood took out part of his fence, and these Singmaster deer escaped. They don't really know how many deer that this J.O. owned, but it's widely accepted that around 60 escaped and took up residence along the nearby Skunk River. No attempt evidently was ever made to recapture them. And now here we are.
there we go.
Isn't that crazy?
Singmaster buck.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what, I mean, again, I would really be going into like stalker territory here, but it'd be really fun to try to find some of that family. I guarantee you they could tell you this story.
Oh yeah.
The other thing that in these articles that talked about that there was some time along the way, somebody went and tried, does anybody have a rack from that back then? Like, does anybody have one anywhere? And
nobody did.
No. It's just kind of crazy, dude. Like, you think about all this stuff that we all these material things that are so important to us, and it all just goes away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's crazy because, think about that. That guy just oh, whatever. And now here we are a couple hundred years later talking about this guy from Pottawatomie County and, from Washington County and just really, really cool stuff and Kyoto and all that. Yeah. So really interesting. So that's what was happening privately in the state of Iowa. And that's the other thing to remember. It talks about, and I read a lot of things that said that they got rid of the hunting season, but people were still doing what they had to do.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
People were still hunting. They were like, you know what? Listen, we're hungry or whatever. Exactly. You know what I mean? They were still killing deer.
Yeah.
But they took away the season. So the interesting thing is that the state of Iowa started to try to do some things to try to bring back the deer herd as well. They actually got deer from Minnesota, they got deer from Wisconsin, and they started transplanting them. So interestingly, you hear about this like buying and selling or trading animals.
Yeah.
A lot of Western states are doing that right now. Actually, my buddy Ben just was on Antelope Island in Wisconsin. He was on Antelope Island in Utah, where they've transplanted bighorn sheep.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And the state of Utah is heavily invested in seeing that population grow. So that buying and selling or trading is still happening now
Yeah.
in a lot of Western states. Well, that's what the state of Iowa did way back then. You follow?
It's crazy.
So they bought actually one of the places where a pair of these deer was dropped off and where they were first established is in 1928. 2 deer were purchased from Minnesota and were released in Ledges State Park, which is just down southwest of Ames.
Oh, really?
Yeah, dude. Yeah, like that's literally right off the Des Moines River. Ledges State Park is right off the Des Moines River.
Got it.
I mean, yeah, it's just bizarre. And then in later years, deer from the Ledges herd were then put in other parts of the state as well. Do you follow me?
Yep.
So it's safe to say that maybe, well, and it's all speculation. Were the deer that were in those private herds, were they from Iowa? Were they just like deer that got caught? Or did he buy them from somewhere else? We got deer in Ledges State Park that first came from Minnesota, deer that came from Wisconsin.
Yep.
It's crazy to think about.
It is.
And we talk about, Iowa whitetails. Well, are the Iowa whitetails actually from Iowa? It's kind of interesting.
It is.
Yeah, it's super interesting. All right. So, yeah, like I said, it was in the 1920s that the state of Iowa put this pair in Ledges State Park, and then they obviously try to keep track of them. They not only survived, but they multiplied. In fact, by 1940, descendants of that first transplant were moved and trapped and released in other various parts of the state.
Jeez.
Wow.
Can you imagine if right now they closed the deer season for 50 years and like they could actually like enforce it?
Oh, dude, I'm going to get to that. There's something I'm going to get to next.
Okay.
To your point, hold that thought, because some of these other facts will really start to blow your mind, where you're going to go, holy cow. Okay. All right. So they closed the season for 54 years.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, we saw earlier, we talked about Pottawatomie County, right? And those deer that it took 3 years, and all of a sudden 3 to 4 years, and they doubled. You follow me?
Yep.
The population just exploded. Well, that continued to happen. All of a sudden, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and the state's going, okay, we're starting to get complaints, right? By the 1950s, Iowa was an ag state, right? Much of the land had been cultivated. A lot of the land had been plowed up, farmed. But now all of a sudden we were starting to see problems with just deer and agriculture. You know what I mean? So again, rewinding just a little bit, by 1936, the DNR officials estimated the deer herd to be around 500 to 700 animals. 1936.
Okay.
They consider that to be maybe a very conservative estimate. They're not really 100% sure. There wasn't great reporting. In 1947, the first statewide population estimate was made with the deer reported in 58 counties containing an estimated 1,650 animals. Deer herds were reported in 89 counties in 1950, and the population had expanded to 13,000. It went from 1,600 to 13,000 in not very long. From 1947 to 1950. Went from 1,600 to 13,000 because of the protection of the, no hunting season. So again, they thought the first couple were conservative, and then they did this big count, and it was like, oh yeah, 13,000 animals. Yeah. So the state knew they had to do something.
Yeah.
In 1952, the hunting season, the first hunting season would have been the 1952-1953 season, was when it was first brought back. It was December of 1953. First season was brought back, and they killed 4,000 whitetails that first season.
Dang.
Yeah, a lot more than you would think. Was restricted to 45 counties. It was 5 days, killed 4,000 deer.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, it's kind of neat to think back. It's 2024 to think back to 1950 something and go, dang, you know?
That's insane.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. And it's been held annually since 1953. So it's 1952. They said, okay, let's bring back the hunting season.
Yep.
1953, they did it. Killed 4,000 whitetail in 5 days. And then we've had whitetail deer hunting seasons ever since in some shape or form.
Really crazy.
It's really, really interesting, isn't it?
4,005 days, dude.
Yes, yes. And the even more bizarre thing is when you start to talk about the number of deer that are out there now. Jeez, dude. It's pretty insane. Now 54, 55, I mean, more than that. 1953 to 2024. How many years is that? That's a lot. We harvest 100,000 deer annually.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just really, really, really interesting stuff. Okay. Let me see here. There's a couple other facts about that I really want to tell you. So let's get into the other part that will blow your mind. So we've established that obviously Iowa becoming a state in 1946 was huge.
Yep.
Starting to protect the whitetails in the 1850s, and then completely stopping the season for 50 plus years. These private deer herds that started to grow and then just escaped. And then the state of Iowa trying to do what they could, buying deer from other states and putting them out. All that's just huge dominoes that fell. But the other thing that's interesting that really carries through then and now is how fast deer can repopulate.
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about that last week on the episode with Jace.
Yep.
Right? He really talked about that, like how quickly they can bounce back. Even back then, you could see how they were bouncing back. Yeah. And I found some interesting facts about that. So again, we talk about, well, why do deer in Iowa do so well? Well, part of the reason is, there's a lot of talk about how snow depths in Iowa rarely get over 12 inches for prolonged lengths of time.
Yep.
You think about the southern half of the state, they get snow, but a lot of times it melts.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes away.
Yep.
We'll get it and we'll keep it here in North Iowa. But in southern half of Iowa, you get on Des Moines or south and they'll get a snow, but it doesn't mean it's going to be there for 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So it's obviously, deer, those types of factors really allow deer to come through the winter bottleneck very healthy.
Yep.
I mean, think about this last winter, dude. I scooped my driveway like twice. We didn't have any snow.
Yeah, nothing.
There wasn't even a winter bottleneck.
Yeah.
There wasn't a bottle. There was no winter. Right?
Riddle me that.
Riddle me that. Wicka, wicka, wicka. I just made a rap. I didn't even know it. Oh, did we just make a microclip? Yep. Psh, psh. Okay. All right. So interesting thing is that what you really start to look at is what's really crazy is you think about, obviously they come through the winters. We protect deer from guns during the rut, right? It's a bow only during the rut, right? We have limited methods of take. We have, comparatively to a lot of states, we have limited number of hunters, right? Whether that's non-residents, especially non-residents, it's not unlimited, 6,000 altogether.
Yeah.
You follow me? And it's only so many of those during the rut even.
Right.
You follow me?
Yep.
So all those factors lead to deer having the opportunity to repopulate.
Yeah.
But the crazy thing with that as well is that they say, again, it's from the state of Iowa, that some does are bred the first year, producing a single fawn, and many have 2 fawns each year subsequently after that. Deer in the wild can maintain these high productive reproduction rates until they're up to 10 years old. Past research in Iowa has found that 8 to 12% of adult does have 3 fawns. So do the math on that. A doe the first year has 1. And then year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So the next 9 years, she's probably having 2. Okay. So now we're at 1 plus, I'm terrible at math. Let's just say another 18.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's 19. And then let's just say on 25% of those 9 years, she has triplets. One doe can give you 20 plus deer in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
That's insane. And that's why in 3 to 4 years, they can just grow so fast.
Yeah.
You follow me? It's really, really, really incredible. So we talk about how not only a doe is having twins or triplets
Right.
within a couple years. I mean, she's really, really popping them out. But not only that, but again, we have milder winters.
Yep.
We have limited hunting besides a bow during the rut.
Yeah.
We really control the methods of take.
Yep.
We really control the number of hunters when it comes to non-residents.
Yeah.
All this leads to, the opportunity for deer to grow. And the only real mortality for deer, there's no natural predators.
Yeah.
It's hunters.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the Iowa DNR uses hunters to help. But again, they talk about if the herd was to go unchecked, it would grow at a rate of 20 to 40% a year.
Oh my God.
At this rate, deer numbers would double in as few as 3 years.
Oh man.
Think about that. So you said that earlier.
Yeah.
If you went 54 years with the populations of what they are now and had no hunting, oh my goodness. It would be like Big Buck Adventureland.
I know. Can you imagine that?
Well, and there were probably at that point, you would think there would be some sort of crazy disease.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be able to the speed limits would be 25 miles an hour. Seriously, dude, can you imagine?
Yeah. Be insane.
Well, it talks about too that I was reading things about right here. It also talks about that. He says it says that obviously with Iowa's abundance of ag providing so much food, if hypothetically the populations were to go unchecked like that, densities could potentially reach 100 or more deer per square mile.
What?
100 deer per square mile. Dang. Imagine that, dude. Imagine you went out hunting.
I'd still figure out a way to screw it up.
You'd still go out and not see anything?
Yeah, probably.
But the moral of the story is that I'll tell you what, deer can repopulate. And it's a real testament to just how resilient of an animal they are.
Right.
And it's kind of interesting to you think back on kind of the checkered past that Iowa has kind of had with other animals. Because again, I look back at the whole thing with the bison and the elk and the black bear, and I go, God, what a letdown.
Yeah.
If we would have just became a state 25 years earlier, if we would have just had the forward thinking to go, maybe we should protect these things.
Yeah.
And luckily we did with whitetails. I mean, even to stop hunting for 50 years for whitetails, think about that. If you had somebody for the Iowa legislature, the governor of Iowa in 1900, and you go, hey, you know what? I'm from 2025. Just so you know, Iowa whitetail hunting is going to be huge. And they'd be like, what? We don't even have a deer season right now. It's going to be huge. We don't even have any whitetails.
Yeah.
We're protecting them for we don't even know how long. They protect them for 50 years. There's 50 years of governors like, oh, no hunting season.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy to think about?
It is wild.
It's just insane. And now it's in 75 years, it's become what it is now. That's really something.
Well, and especially because 75 years really isn't that long.
It's not that long at all.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah. So the other really, really random fact, this might be one of my favorite facts that I found. This is right up your alley. The largest deer ever reported in Iowa was a 440-pound buck taken in Monona County during the 1962 hunting season.
What?
Somebody might have accidentally checked in a cow.
That sounds like a steer to me.
That sounds like a mule deer. No, that is a big deer.
Holy
440 pounds.
Dude.
Think about that. I literally read that. I got really close to it. I'm like, is that right? Sure enough, 440 pounds, 440-pound buck. Can you imagine that guy walking around?
I honestly can't.
I'll tell you what, 440 pounds, that is a big deer. Think about that.
That's a big hoss.
I mean, geez, oh Pete's.
I can't even imagine what that would look like walking around, dude.
Oh my gosh. I mean, a deer like that probably can't even turn his neck. He just like does move his whole body.
Yeah.
Like just like go like this.
Yeah.
I just imagine a deer with like these huge traps. Just like walking around and be like, hey, what's up?
He's just sculpted.
It's like, you know where the gym is? You know, like
yeah,
either
it's
that
down
or,
over there west of that coulee.
yeah. Or the opposite of that, he could have been a deer that's just like sitting on the couch, just clicking
Yeah,
channels,
that's probably what it
eating
was.
Doritos.
That's probably what it was.
He's just like, oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah.
Give me some cherry Pepsi.
And some corn.
Oh, so yeah, really interesting. Like I said,
Yeah.
especially after last week having Jason on, I thought that was just such a cool thing to hear him talk about it and really kind of feel like we got to see behind the curtain
Yeah, exactly.
on a lot of that stuff. And I thought, you know what? We did this about the bison and everything like that. There's got to be some really cool history about Iowa. And this, honestly, I feel like it didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to think just kind of, again, about kind of the checkered past and then how it's kind of come out of it.
Yeah. I think that's the coolest part too. Is just like, it's really interesting to know like what the state went through to get to where we are now, you know? It's
Yeah.
pretty insane.
Yeah.
It'd be cool to see where it goes too.
You know what's interesting too, do you think about? Let's get our phone out here. Let's do some math. Okay. Let's do a little math here.
Okay.
Let's just say, okay, so let's just use round numbers to get to round numbers. Let's say it's the 2025 hunting season.
Okay.
And let's say they released deer in ledges at 1925. It's 100 years. I didn't need a calculator for that. But let's say a whitetail lives for 5 years.
Okay.
That means when you really think about it, potentially when you go, how many generations, how long have they evolved to know what to do, where to go? We could be within 20 to 30 generations of the original whitetail.
That's pretty wild.
Like the great, got to say great a bunch of times, great grandpa whitetail. It's kind of neat to think about.
It is.
To think that like
Really not that far.
our kids or our kids' kids, it could be 50 generations.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to talk. Well, you know, there's no way to do it. It'd be super cool, hypothetically, if you could talk to a hunter from 1953
That would be sweet.
and say, man, I wonder if we could find somebody. That would be really cool. How old would they be? Let's do the math on that. 2025 minus, let's do the 2024 minus 1953, 71. So let's say they were 20. They could still be alive.
Yeah. 90s.
Wow, that could be cool if we could find somebody that hunted the first
Oh,
whitetail season.
that would be sick, actually.
Oh my goodness. Stay tuned, folks.
We're going to see what we can do.
Riddle me that. We're going to do some checking, but that's pretty interesting. Imagine if you talk to somebody back then and just like, what was it like? Or what was it? Was it different?
Yeah.
Oh man, those deer didn't know any better. They just stood there.
Yeah.
Well, think about it, dude. They hadn't get hunted. Well,
Giants running everywhere.
Well, they hadn't been hunted in 50 years. Can you imagine how many deer just died of old age? Could you imagine 50 years of no hunting? We walk onto a farm around, we're like, this place is mint. It hasn't been hunted in 5 years.
Yeah. This place hasn't been hunting in 35 years, dude.
It's really interesting.
It is.
I'll tell you what, though. The one thing I thought was kind of crazy, too, though, which, you know, they talk about how they didn't hunt deer. But again, it was not like the numbers were huge back then. You follow me? We're thinking about it from the mindset of, oh, there's 400,000 deer. There wasn't.
Yeah.
You heard in the numbers, it was like 13,000, 14,000 deer. So it wasn't that we're getting a little skewed, right?
Yeah.
Our mind goes to like, oh my gosh, but there just wasn't that many deer around.
Yeah, but still, though, if you think about it, if you have a less number of deer, that would mean probably bigger bucks
Yeah.
compared to if you had a higher number. You know what I mean?
Yep. And there has been, you know, I've seen pictures of just absolute cranks. I'll tell you what, though, you know what this is really going to make me want to do?
What?
And I never even thought about it. At the Iowa Deer Classic, you see people that bring in old racks, and I've seen racks in there from like
Way long ago.
the 60s.
Yep.
I swear I saw some from like the late 50s that were just like the head looked terrible.
Yeah.
You know, but it was just a rack. You know what I mean? Like you're looking at the rack and they were just monsters. Be really, really interesting to see how old of a deer we could find in there.
That would be sweet.
Because I would think at some point those types of bucks get passed down from generation to generation.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
You know. Yep. All right, well, I say we wrap it up.
Yeah.
Like I said, listen, this is a hot and steamy podcast. If you're listening to this in your car, turn your heat off, turn the AC off, crank the heat, roll up the windows, and just have it just blow that hot air right in your face. You know how we feel right now.
Yep, exactly.
It's not really blowing hot air, it's just not moving.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, another one in the books. Episode 56, Iowa History Whitetails. I'm happy with this. I think this one was good.
Yeah, sweet.
Yep. Hey, thanks for listening. Stay tuned next week. Over and out.
See you next week.
Stay classy.